I get it, you're staring at the add to cart button and wondering if splurging on a pre-built rig is worth it, especially when you've already spent hours watching benchmarks and scrolling through endless forums. Imagine you're about to invite a few friends over for a game night. You want everything to run smooth, the graphics to pop, and you definitely don't want the whole house to sound like a jet engine. That's the spot I'm in right now, and I've been digging into the Skytech Gaming Blaze 5 to see if it actually lives up to the hype or if it's just another flashy box. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the kind of person who'll get the most out of this machine. If you're a serious PC gamer who likes to push the envelope on settings, dabble in 4K or high-refresh 1440p, and maybe even dabble in some light streaming, this is the kind of pre-built that can save you the headache of hunting down each component. The Ryzen 7 9800X 3D paired with an RTX 5080 gives you a combination that's hard to match in a single box, and the 32GB of DDR5 running at 6000 MHz means you won't be hitting a memory ceiling anytime soon. On the other hand, if you're mostly playing indie titles, stick to 1080p, or you're comfortable building your own system to save a few $100, you might be better off looking elsewhere. One of the first practical things I noticed when unboxing was the size of the case. It's a mid-tower that feels solid, but the front panel is a little tighter than I'd like when you're trying to slip a graphics card into the PCIe slot. It's not a deal-breaker, but it does add a few minutes to the setup process, something to keep in mind if you're not used to fiddling with cables. Speaking of cables, Skytech has done a decent job of managing them out of the box. The power supply is an 850W gold-rated unit, which gives you headroom for future upgrades, and the cables are labeled, so you won't be guessing which is which when you start plugging things in. Cooling is where this rig tries to differentiate itself. The 360mm AIO liquid cooler is mounted right on top of the CPU, and the fans are set up in a push-pull configuration that actually keeps the temps under control even when you're running demanding titles like Cyberpunk 2077 at ultra settings. In my tests, the CPU stayed in the low 70 SC range during long sessions, which is impressive for a machine that's crammed with high-end components. That said, the AIO does add a bit of extra weight, and you'll notice a faint whine from the pump after a while. It's not obnoxious, but if you're sensitive to noise in a quiet apartment, you might want to tweak the fan curves or consider a custom fan profile. Storage is another area where the Blaze 5 shines. The 2TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD offers blazing fast load times, and I could launch a fresh install of a fresh-out-her-box game in under 10 seconds. The extra capacity also means you don't have to constantly shuffle around files to make room for new titles. If you're the type who keeps a massive library of AAA games, this is a real convenience. However, the drive is soldered onto the motherboard, so swapping it out isn't as straightforward as pulling a SATA drive. You'll need to be comfortable opening the case and dealing with a few screws if you ever want to upgrade. Now, let's get into the real-world performance you'll actually feel. I ran a mix of modern titles: Valorant, Red Dead Redemption 2, and even a VR session with Half-Life, Alyx, without having to dip below 60 frames per second at 1440p. In Valorant, the frame rates were well over 200 frames per second, which is great for competitive play. Red Dead at ultra settings hovered around 70 frames per second, which is smooth enough that you won't notice any stutter, even with the dense foliage and dynamic weather. The RTX 5080's ray tracing cores handle those effects without choking the system, which is a relief because many pre-built rigs with similar price points still struggle when you enable RTX. For VR, the combination of high refresh rates and low latency kept the experience comfortable, no motion sickness from dropped frames. One practical downside I ran into was the Wi-Fi module. The Blaze 5 ships with Wi-Fi 5, 802.11 AC, instead of the newer Wi-Fi 6. If you have a fast fiber connection and rely on a wireless link, you'll still get decent speeds, but you won't be tapping into the full potential of your ISP's bandwidth. The Ethernet port is fine, but you'll need to run a cable if you want the absolute best speeds. This is something that can be upgraded later, but it's worth noting if you're hoping for a completely cable-free setup. The operating system comes pre-installed with Windows 11, and there's no bloatware, which is a breath of fresh air. I booted straight into the